So hi everyone, my name is Emma Vinnitsky and this is my mother Marina Vinnitsky, and we are going to be doing an interview together for the CLES Canada course. I will be asking her questions and she will be answering them. So yeah, looking forward to it. Okay, hi Marina.
Hello.
Hi Mom.
Hello.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions and you just feel free to answer them as you wish. I won't interrupt.
So my name is Marina Vinnitsky. I used to be Marina Kleiner. And I born in former Soviet Union in place called Ukraine. Now it's Ukraine in city Kiev. I was born in typical Jewish family. I had mother and father, and my grandparents, in particularly my grandmothers, used to be a big part of my family as well. My family used to be my immediate family wasn't that big. My mother had only one older sister, and my father didn't have anybody because his only brother was killed during the war. But my grandmothers and the other generation used to have a lot of relatives. In fact, my grandmother came from the family of 20 children. So she had millions of nieces and nephews and so on. In Russia, it was very traditional, had a lot of big celebrations. Celebrations not related, I wouldn't say related particularly to Jewish holidays, because that wasn't part of the Soviet life there. But it mostly was celebrations related to birthdays. Every member of the family had its own birthday party, and usually it was quite a big celebration. It always happened at home, and people used to, first of all, saved and kind of collected food for months prior to it, and then maybe cook for a week just to have enough food. In my family, we used to have, I would say, 2 day celebration. One was something called mishpucha, and this is when the whole family used to get together, all the cousins, all the aunt and uncles, and the second day it was for my family, for my parents' friends when they used to come. When I didn't really have again, as I said, I'm from a small family, so I basically only had one aunt and one cousin, her son. When I was 5 something years old, my mom enrolled me in piano lessons, and this when I started playing piano, I would say, and eventually piano became a big part of my life, and actually it was my life. My first piano teacher was, one thing I have to add, majority of people that my parents, my family connected with were Jews. Whether it was teachers, whether it was their co-workers, their family friends, and of course relatives. It was very Jewish environment without actually naming it Jewish. So my first piano teacher was a Jewish woman, of course. She was already in certain age, and she was born and before revolution, and she came from I would say rich noble family. Again, it's all my guessing because she would never openly admit it. At the time I came to her, she was probably in her 60s. She was a single woman. All her family perished in Babi Yar. She was a sole survivor. And again, it was a guess because openly, maybe once or twice, she mentioned it, and that was it. Since she was old school, old European school, like something that you don't see people like that anymore. She had, in, inquisitive manners and way to talk to people and way to deal to people. And when she actually not only taught her students how to play piano, it was way more included. It was way bigger picture than that. She always kind of hided her Jewish identity, even though, of course, we all knew who she was. Because as a teacher, even though a piano teacher, you were considered an ideology mentor back then. So if somebody from the from her bosses in school and so on would find out that she's somehow practices Judaism or something close to it, she would have lots of trouble. So only after her death, we found out that she was a strong member of a small Jewish synagogue. Um, in such a big city as Kiev, at that time they probably had 1-2 million people living there, and maybe half or less, half or close to it, were Jews. And in such a big city, there was only one really small old synagogue, and only old people used to go there. And apparently she was a member of that place. And another thing that she used to do, since her whole family perished in Holocaust, she used to go on September 28th, 29th. That was an anniversary of Babi Yar. So there were a lot of, especially in latest years, where the refuseniks came to picture and so on. There was a lot of demonstrations and public meetings. That was quite dangerous because quite a few people afterwards would go to jail or maybe to mental institution. She was always going there, all dressed up in mink coat with diamonds, with chignon. Do you know what chignon is? It's like fake hairs that you add on to sort of like on top high hairs. And she would always go. She didn't care. She knew that was her day. She would be there. So that lady, my whole family was afraid of her because everybody, my aunt, my brother, who was 10 years, who is 10 years older than me, wasn't really involved in my life, but everybody knew who she was. When, God forbid, I wasn't practicing good enough or well enough with all her nobility and good manners, she would call my mother, give her hell. So everybody was like, oh my God, like, afraid of her phone calls. So from the other, I used to call her like second mother. This is how our attitude towards professors, towards teachers used to be. So everybody had to accommodate her. Even though I still did what I did, like I practiced like I was supposed to. What I felt sometimes when I was left with my grandmother, who knew nothing about music, I was just sitting there and reading a book and pressing some whatever random stuff, and that's the way I did things. And my grandmother would later report to my mother that I did practice, but you can understand the results. Then the phone call would follow that. Anyways, that was funny. Yeah, my whole family was afraid. From the other hand, since she was really well educated and grew up probably with French governance and exposed to arts and so on, she was really tried to enroll me, and not only me, quite a number of her students. Since she didn't have her own children, we were her children, literally. So she was really trying to expose us to music, to opera, to concerts, to general arts. And I was a good recipient, I would say. I liked that stuff. Not at that age, though. She would schlep me and my mother to the opera. My mother came from a little bit different background. Her family wasn't so, let's say, well educated and sort of like well prepared in arts and so on. So when she would call and invite us to go to sort of like accompany her to go to the opera, let's say, and she would mention, I am anticipating the pleasure. My mother would hang up and say, what kind of pleasure she's anticipating? what pleasure is there? So I was actually, she was always carrying with her um, box of chocolate. And and in the intermission, that's what we were eating. And I was actually, this is what I was looking forward to. She was quite chubby. She liked good food and good meal. And she never cut her short of it. She would have, at that time, she couldn't have any maids or people actually serving her. So, but she had a lot of students that really appreciated what she was doing for them. So, a lot of parents actually would cook for her or bring some meal to her. She used to have white, well manicured hands, and that she wouldn't do anything. So, but she was always carrying good kind of like sweets with her and so on. Anyway, when I was little and I used to go to the concert with her, I was so bored to pieces. And I would count how many people wearing glasses, and how many men were bald, things like that. But then she knew a lot of artists, and then after the concert, we would go on the backstage and talk to them. And anyway, that was an interesting time. I wish I would be smarter at that time and learn a little bit more. For me, it was like, what's going on? That's like something like, let's get out of here. That's kind of like how I felt. Anyway, later on, when I graduated, it was a little different music system there. And when I graduated from this the first stage, the music school, I not got enrolled, through a number of very difficult examinations. I got enrolled in this next step, which was a music college. It was, now they called Music Institute, Musiclier Institute of Kiev, and they're very proud and very snobby about it. This is where I got enrolled after I finished with her. And there I had another Jewish teacher who was my mentor, my professor. She was another character. That's something, I don't know why in my life I had such a character. She was always saying, "Oh, nobody's doing for me any good things. I'm such a poor soul." But she could get like hell put together with the do whatever she needs to do, and she was unbelievable with her students. Like again, really treating them not only like how to play piano, but we spent a lot of time together. And I probably would go to her with a lot of my problems first, and then maybe to my mother second, if ever. So our teachers were big part of our lives. And then when I graduated this second level, which probably was equal somewhere to a bachelor degree, um, again through my final level, which something called the conservatory. In Kiev, it was a conservatory, Tchaikovsky's conservatory, which I wanted to get in, but at first, uh, from everybody I knew, from everybody I talked to, we knew that for Jews that place out of reach. So in this, in the music, in the college where I was studying, this institute, by the way, it's Glier Institute. There were a number of Jews, teachers and students. But in higher level, by the time that I was supposed to get in, they kicked out all the Jews. The students were the students. There was a small number of students and hardly any professors. So when I was getting in there, the first year I decided not even to try. I went somewhere far away in Russia, in a place called Gorky. At that time they called it Gorky. I think now it's Nizhny Novgorod. I hated it there. But I wasn't local. I hated it. Didn't make any efforts, and I went through all 9 exams. That's what we need to go through to get in. And there was no competition anymore. At the end, they had less people um, left than they could accept, and yet they still didn't want to accept me. I was so happy. At the day I found out that they're not planning to accept me, at the same minute I got the tickets, and I was out of there on the train. Like I would say in like an hour or so, I was already on the train back home. Anyway, uh, so I was kind of again at loss, didn't know what to do that year. I was sure continue practicing, and in my mind, I knew that sooner or later I will get somewhere. I will get my higher education. It was no questions about it. I got lucky though. In a month or so, I got a phone call, and I was offered a job actually in this Glier Institute to work, like starting from the bottom level as a accompanist, which was a big honor at that time because um, nobody without this master degree was accepted to work there. I was actually the only one. So somebody really wanted me to work with him, and this is how I got in. For the first 2 or 3 months, it was such a big thing for us that I refused to go and collect my salary because there was a small accounting office where we had to line up, and of course it was all in cash. So we had to line up to receive whatever, like rubles, like nothing, but something at that time we could get. And I would be lining up with all my former teachers that I just graduated. So I kind of feel so uncomfortable. I wouldn't go there until they found me and gave me help because something they had to go through their books. It was a big deal, and then I started collecting my salary. So since that was in a way my fate, because that's kind of like was one in a lifetime opportunity to get a job like that. And I knew if again I would go somewhere out of town to get to conservatory, I would lose this job. So I decided to go and try to get into this Tchaikovsky Conservatory in Kiev next year. Again, everybody was trying to talk me out of it and saying it was impossible, but I made up my mind and I decided to do it. The number of Jewish uh, students who were like the enrolled, how to say, trying to get in, yeah, um, was quite small. And in fact, we kind of were staying, we were friendly and we knew everybody, but we kind of were staying aside. And I still remember how other people, Ukrainian, Russians, would approach me and give me the number of Jews that were trying to get in and who has more chances and how many would be accepted and so on and so on. Anyway, at the end, I was extremely lucky and I get in and that's to them who didn't believe in me. And yeah, that was it. And my next 5 years I spent there, and I was working part time in this Clear Institute all the years that I was studying in conservatory. And upon graduation, I get a job, and I was really promoted there by that time. I was already accompanist, had kind of like part-time professor, and so on. That was a big honor. It was a big something really good for me. but didn't last long because soon after we left for Canada and all my rewards sort of thing was in the past. So upon arriving to Canada, life was totally changed and totally different. We had to start sort of like building our life from scratch here. And so the easiest way for me was to start simply teaching piano. Whoever wanted to get lessons from me. Eventually, my business sort of like grew. I had a huge number of students who got involved and very busy. But my family life probably was my priority, and you always have to compromise. So I choose my family versus my kind of like career, which I'm happy with. So yeah, so I still teach. I don't have a big number of students anymore, but I'm quite busy, and this is where I am. I have two wonderful daughters. One of them is Emma. She's my youngest one, and yeah, I have a wonderful life. Yeah. Now we have to applaud. In terms of my family background, as I mentioned earlier, I was born in the former Soviet Union. Now in the place called Ukraine, in the city Kiev. At that time, that place was very much populated with Jews. It was the I think it was the third largest city in the Soviet Union. It's a beautiful city. It has a lot of hills. It's very green. It's a city with a very nice climate. It's dry. It's a moderate climate. It's dry. It's never too hot. It's never too cold. It has four seasons, and it's beautiful. It's the oldest city in so-called Kievskaya Rus, which means Russia started from Kiev. So, for some historic reason, I'm not sure why, but for some historic reason, a lot of Jews settled into Kiev by the time I was born, and prior to it. I think because the shtetl belt was around Kiev area, and when the Jews were escaping pogroms and so on, they were coming to a big city, which was Kiev at that time. Um, I was born in a Jewish family. I had an older brother. My both parents were engineers. At that time, majority of Jews were so-called engineers. It's included everything, electrical engineering, I don't know, mechanical, chemical. If you ask a Jew, what are you doing? They would say, I'm an engineer. That was the deal. But my parents specifically were working and sort of like a drafting architectural pl- place. I wouldn't say office because it was a big organization that were creating and they were behind a lot of like nuclear stations, um, sort of like electra and energy stations and so on. In fact, their organization was behind Chernobyl as well. They created it and architected that. Um, Both parents were working, and that was very typical in Soviet families at that time. That both parents used to go to work full time. Majority of kids were looked by their grandparents. When I was born, both of my grandfathers were deceased. One a long time ago during the war, I'm not sure when, um, or why, and one just, I think, a couple weeks when I was born. So mostly I had two grandmothers. One was living with us, my paternal grandmother was living with us. Her duties were to take care of the family, to cook meals, take care of the kids, and so on. and my maternal grandmother was living with my mother's older sister, and her duties were to do the same thing for my mother's sister and her family. So that was pretty much very typical structure of the families at that time. My childhood was very safe and secure, and I would say sunny and nice and warm and loving. Um, the generation, my parents and grandparents, that were the generation of survivors, people who went through the war, people like my grandmothers, probably generations that went through pogroms, but yet, as the children, we knew nothing about it. Nobody talked about bad things ever. We were protected. We felt like we were protected, and the world is a good place. Um, I knew that I had only one responsibility, which was studying. And I knew that's my priority. I had to go to school and get good grades, and later on I had to do piano. That was what I was supposed. That was my responsibility. The rest I knew nothing. The rest life was good, and I did day-to-day base. Did I don't know, my routine stuff every day. I had friends, we would go. We didn't have any big activities. We were, at that time, kids weren't enrolled in many things. They were enrolled in one or two things, but they were serious. Whatever they were doing, like in my case, that was music. So I was very seriously involved with music. Other kids, let's say, were doing dancing or swimming or some kind of sport. Whatever they were doing, they were serious. Nobody would do things more or less for fun unless you would do things with your family. Um, as far as so my parents were educated people, but my grandparents, I don't think they were educated people. They were from little shtetl. I think my grandmother survived pogroms. She mentioned once that she was hiding somewhere under the bed when somebody was coming to their place with two little babies, and then probably she escaped to Kiev. Um, that's pretty much all I remember. Um, as I said, I was a Jew, and everybody around me was a Jew. But in the Soviet time, uh, there was kind of like given thing, but at the same time hidden thing. So openly, people wouldn't actually. As I said, there was a one small synagogue that only a very small number of people used to go to, and me as a young child and people close to me in age, we knew nothing about it. Our family didn't practice any Judaism. The Jewish music or any Jewish cultural things weren't even part of our families. That was somewhere in the past, way before I was born, and nobody talked about it. How I discovered it for myself, though. Once when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, I'm not sure, something like this, I discovered an old box with old records. Those records survived the war somewhere. They were, I don't know where they were. They belonged to somebody, like some grandfather, an uncle, or somebody who liked this kind of music. And suddenly I discovered them. And I was a little kid and I started listening on the old gramophone. I started listening to the old records. You could hardly hear anything. There was a lot of noise, a lot of background noise. But here, first time in my life, I've heard those Yiddish songs. Um, Suddenly, for me, it was like a deja vu. Something that I felt so connected, so in love, so much related to. I started bugging anybody who could help me with to explain what were the words, what those songs were all about, and actually for me, those songs those Yiddish songs were the first connections with Yiddish, not only Yiddish culture, not only Yiddish language, but the whole Jews things, the whole um, my connections and my belonging to the Jewish people. It's a very, I would say, I don't want to say that I was unique, but in a certain way I was. Um, that thing, none of my friends knew about it. That was hidden only in our family, and only people. I only did it during our family gathering and family celebrations. And my at my aunt's house, we had an old piano, which I was always playing, and in my family we had my piano that I used to play. The music wasn't the problem for me. I was picking melodies really easy by ears. The problem was the words. So in this broken Yiddish, without actually understanding what am I, or barely understanding what am I singing, I'm sure with a lot of like wrong pronunciations and wrong words, I was singing Yiddish songs. And uh, it's somehow through that and at my family gathering, we started actually singing Jewish songs, and more than we sang maybe Soviet repertoire. I have to actually add that my family, I wouldn't say that they were musical people or music was their profession, but they liked singing. My father had a lovely voice, and he had his own repertoire. He was a war veteran, and he went through the war. His repertoire was mostly wartime songs, those Russian, Soviet wartime songs. And in general, it was like this Soviet repertoire that my family used to sing. And then later on, when I started doing the Yiddish songs, this is how the Yiddish songs were added to our family concerts. I have to add some things. I know some people that used to come as a children, really young children, to our family celebrations, and over the years, through my I would say introduction to they later actually they admitted through my introduction them to Yiddish songs and through the Yiddish songs maybe to Yiddishkeit, they became even religious, and then they changed their way how they live. They all live in the States. None of them left back in Kiev, obviously, but they change of the way they live their life. They more belong to Judaism. They more belong. The Jewishkeit is more part of their life.
Is there any particular Yiddish songs that you remember that were passed down specifically, or not really?
Nothing was passed down as it is. Whatever I learned, this is what I discovered from those old broken noisy not CDs, records. So something that I was, yeah, there are a number of them. Now, luckily by living in Canada, there was no books. There was nowhere I could actually read uh, read the words or read the lyrics for those songs. But that's what it was. Actually, I have to add, in my family, for my grandparents' generation, Yiddish was their first language. In fact, they came from little shtetls. Their Russian was kind of like with a strong Yiddish accents, with the pronunciation. They couldn't pronounce R the way R, the way we pronounce it in Russian. They had this like R, like the Jews used to say, and all the non-Jews were making fun of that, including me, by the way, because that's how we used to be. Now my kids making fun of my English. That's another story, though. So. But they didn't know how to read or write. Even in Russian, my grandmother barely could write Russian. So nobody could write anything for me or translate, so everything was passed on. Maybe then my parents, their Yiddish was their first language, but over the years they never used it except when they wanted to hide something from their kids. And they used to speak between two of them, speak Yiddish or with my grandmother. But actually this is how I learned a little bit of Yiddish from them, hiding things from me. That is how I learned to understand a little bit of Yiddish. So whatever I heard of those records, I was like gibberish translated Yiddish, because half of my parents, let's say my mother, would forget half of the Yiddish to begin with. Then you couldn't properly hear what they were talking about. So that's what I was passed on. So mostly it was self-discovery, and just because I felt that this is something that belonged only to me. None of my friends could relate to it or understand it or love it as much as I.
Where are the records now?
Who knows? We moved so many places, even back then. There was like an old garbage. People threw it away in the garbage. Nobody cared. You could hear, and again, I have to add, there was a small number of songs because some of them you couldn't even hear. So whatever you could actually hear and understand a bit, that's what I could do. So as I said, that my contact as a child was me. That was the only my contact with Yiddish. By the way, we didn't call it klezmer then. It was something. Klezmer was old-time word that in my time nobody used. There was nothing as a klezmer then. Was just Yiddish music. And by my own connection was those old records and my kind of like love to this music. Through their pain, through their tears, through their love for, I could kind of relate, I could feel the Jewish character. I could feel the personality, the soul, and the spirit, and the mood, and the face, and the life of those Jews. And this is through their songs. This is what they describe, and this is how I discovered it for myself, as well as maybe by reading Sholem Aleichem. And a lot of things in Sholem Aleichem I could relate with this music. So that for me was an introduction to klezmer, or so-called Yiddish Jewish music at that time. When I was older and in later years, at the weddings, they started playing a little bit at the Jewish weddings. They started playing a little bit of Jewish music. And there was Hava Nagila. Again, nobody knew what it was, but people were like the melody, that's what it was. There was another thing called 740. I don't know why it was 740, but that was the 740. We called it like this, and that was, I can play it like a tree, like to give some ideas what it was. So, you will be able to hear, I think. So the 740 was. And again, as I was a child, nobody did that, and I loved it. And I self-taught myself. Sometimes at the big celebrations at home, that's what people were dancing. When the people would get together, they used to have a big, we call zastolia. I don't know how to describe it. It was a big table. Everybody was sitting by the table. They would find chairs, broken chairs, benches, anything would go. Kitchen table, everything would put, like, as many people would sit by the table. There was tons of food, as I mentioned before. People were making toasts, eating, and then they would move those tables and people would start dancing. And since I learned how to play those Jewish dances, I was like a big commodity. Even though I was about maybe 10 years old, I was like entertainer. And I was playing a lot of, that's 740, 740, we used to call 740, Hava Nagila, Lomir, that was part of, then we started Lomir, that was kind of like a wedding thing, but nobody knew whether it's wedding or not wedding. People were singing and having fun, it doesn't matter what it was. Later on, when again it was in later years, in 70s, when the connections with the West, when the political situation changed, there was more connection to the West, people were coming like contraband, is that in English? So people were bringing like some tapes at that time with some Jewish music, and people were passing it around. So Sisters Berry were introduced with their Yiddish music. We learned more and more and more of Jewish, but that was later in 70s. But at first there was like a small numbers, but people, boy, they knew how to have fun and they knew how to make use of all that music. I wanted to add something else. Then again, as I said, people wouldn't admit about Jewish connections, and they wouldn't sing those klezmer Jewish songs per se. But at that time, there were a lot of like folk, so-called, well, I don't know where they came from, folk songs. They were in Russian, but they were parodies on Yiddish Jewish songs. In fact, you were supposed to sing them with a Jewish accent and pronouncing the words sort of like my grandmother would say things. And it was you wouldn't sing it in your schools or when you would meet with your friends. It was in a very small circle of your family and only very close friends. But they were typical Jewish songs. I'll give you some examples. Can you sing it? Это школа Соломона Шкара, школа бальных танцев, вам говорят. Две шаги налево, две шаги направо, шаг вперед и два назад. Мадам Кац, уберите Богу, вам говорят. Он наделал лужу в коридоре, шаг вперед и два назад. Дамы, не сморкайтесь занавески, это неприлично, вам говорят. Это неприлично и не гигиенично, вам говорят. Это школа Соломона Шкара, школа бальных танцев, вам говорят. Две шаги налево, две шаги направо, шаг вперед и два назад. Something like this. Did you understand what I was thinking? Yeah, it's funny, huh? But you wouldn't sing it. It's all in Russian. Or there were old Yiddish songs. Again, I didn't know that they were Yiddish because they were all translated in Russian. And people sang them as Russian songs. Let's say, "Бублички, горячие бублички, купите." It's like bagels, that's the songs that were Yiddish songs. Or Крутится, вертится шар головой, крутится, вертится над головой, and so on. So there were a lot of Russian songs that we thought they were very popular, but in fact they were old Yiddish songs uh, translated in Russian by somebody that people really enjoyed. Nobody had bar mitzvah. Well, I only learned that word when I came to Canada. I've never heard of it. Nobody, like people did, like my generation, didn't even know what it was. So, like birthdays were a big thing. Again, maybe because all that generation were like Holocaust war survivors. All the men went through the army. All the men were war veterans. Women used to be in evacuation, which was a very difficult time for them. Nobody talked about it. Nobody would complain that they had a bad time then. People were trying to live their life today and have as much fun as possible as they could. People didn't complain. You could hardly hear about depressions. You could hardly hear about people needed to live to survive, and as whenever they had the chance to be happy, sing songs, dance. That's what they did.
So as an adult, did you ever teach any of your piano students any klezmer music at all here in Canada?
Yeah. See, upon arriving to Canada, specifically to Vancouver, 99.9% of my students are Chinese. Guess if they're interested in any klezmer music. For them, it's like, what? like they don't know what it is. And but over the time, I had here and there a couple Jewish students, and some of them I did teach a little bit of Yiddish songs, Yiddish dance, Yiddish music. Yeah, klezmer. That's a good question, because I think that klezmer music, when I listen to klezmer music, when I hear klezmer music, it brings me back to my childhood. It connects me with all the people that probably majority of them deceased by now, but people who love me very much, my family, my parents, my grandparents. It connects me with the Jews in general, generations of Jews who were listening to the same kind of music and enjoyed that kind of music as I do. This music actually, as a survivor, it survived through wars, it survived through pogroms, through Holocaust, through horrors, through death, through camps, through immigration, through running, hiding, through so many horrible things that happens to Jews. But this music survived. And it's so nice when you can hear it today still be performed and played, and people still enjoy it as much as probably 100, 200 years people used to enjoy it. This music it connects people from different continents, from Africa and South America, from Europe and from Asia, people who speak people who don't have any languages in common. That's the only thing they have in common. This Jewish roots, the Jewish music, something that they enjoy. And sometimes maybe when you're in company of some people from different countries, from Jews, from totally different background, from totally different world as you are, and suddenly you start singing klezmer and Jewish music, it changes everything. You feel like you met old time lost relative. That's why this music is so important, and I hope all of you will enjoy your time listening to this music, and I hope it's gonna stay with you through your life just the way it stayed with me. So, as I said, I started working in this Glier Institute, and I was studying in conservatory. I have to say that our process of becoming a professional musician took way longer than it's here, and it was a very, very serious process. So all of us were prepared for life as a concert pianist or concert cellist or so on. Of course, a very small percentage would go and be actually a concert somebody, but the level was extremely high. So on my local level, I since I got in working, I started working in this institute in an early age. I was doing a lot of work as an accompanist, and I would say I was quite in a high demand. I feel like I'm bragging. I don't want to brag about but that's the way it was actually. I feel like I was in quite a demand. A lot of people wanted to play with me, and I think I kind of I was a very good accompanist. I wasn't so good in playing solo. Not that so good. I didn't like it that much. I kind of was shy. I had like a little bit of stage fright to be on my own. But when I was with somebody, I really did a good job. I think I really enjoyed it. So I did a lot of. I was doing a lot of things with. My specialty actually was clarinet. I did a lot of with the brass, with the wind instruments, all kind of like this kind of like trumpets, trombones, flute. That was my specialty. Later on, I was doing a little bit with violin, with the voice. So that's what I was doing. I was playing on the venues all over the city in a many concerts. So that's what it was. And I was doing a lot of teaching later on, and being having students and teaching them what I could. Again, as I said, I started with the old records. I don't even know who were the people on those records. What was the name of the people on those records? They kind of were my role models. My further role models, I could only listen to them or being introduced when I was already in certain age. It was basically an adult. One of the first ones were Sisters Berry. They were in 70s. They were very popular. They were very popular in Russia. Uh, Once they came to Moscow, I didn't attend the concert. I think I was young then. But once they came to Moscow with the concert, part of something, because they sang jazz, so they came as a group singing jazz. They weren't allowed to sing anything in Yiddish, but still they came, and this is how they were introduced to Soviet audience. The tapes with their music was passed around. We learned from that music. Another thing that was, but then it was I was older, and I was already formed with my love to Jewish songs, and some of them I knew and loved. But somewhere again in 70s, I would say that was the first Yiddish theater in Yiddish musical theater in Russia. It was formed, I believe, in Moscow by somebody called Yakov Yavno, and his first so-called always sort of was like a Broadway musical, but only based on those old Yiddish songs with a lot of dancers, a lot of performers, and a lot of music, obviously. So it called "Белая уздечка черной кобылицы." I don't know what to translate. It's called like a white saddle for the horse.
Saddle.
White saddle for a black, but it's kabila, like a female horse. I don't know how to say it. And it was something unique. It was something unbelievable. I was maybe about 25. They never came to Kiev because it would be too much term of a turmoil, like turmoil for them to come to Kiev. So they traveled not in so Jewish populated areas where people sort of like enjoyed them, but it wasn't so much connections with their ethnic background and so much connections. So basically, the government was afraid of political, uh, I don't know, revolution, of Jewish political revolution. So they weren't allowed in Jewish populated area. So once I was like in a Caucasus mountain somewhere near the Black Sea, and just happened that they were there with the concert. I went with my friend. We were in shock for days. For us, it was such a big impression. We couldn't, the music, all the actresses, the singers, they were such a beautiful. We never were introduced to any, like, first of all, we never saw the musical as it is. Second of all, the skills, the people that they collected, uh, the singers, the dancers, everything was such a high level, and it's all was based on those old shtetl songs. There was something amazing. There was, I wouldn't say it was exactly a role model for me, but it was something that I still remember so many years later. I still remember because there was something so unique. It was my first introduction to Yiddish theater and the musical and the good, unbelievable level of dancing and singing, and this sort of like first Jewish guys. That's why I still remember them.
Wir bestiget, weil wir hosti it.
Well, I don't have the repertoire because I don't perform anywhere. Um, I can pretty much play everything and anything. If I don't have the music itself, I can always pick up the tune by ears and play it. Few occasions I used to do it, except when I was a child and played at family celebrations. Here in Canada, we organized a couple times something called Sing Along in Yiddish, Yiddish song Sing Along, where like Cantor was helping us and I was playing piano, and there was a big number. We did it in the Jewish Community Center, and then for many years I was part of bar bat mitzvah services at our Reform synagogue. Sometimes they used me as a musical background for, let's say, meditation as part of the prayer service. And then when I had a chance, I tried to do a little bit on top of playing Hebrew songs and so on. Once in a while, I would do some Yiddish songs since I really love it. I can play just some couple of songs with in Yiddish language that I remember since I sorry, since I was a child, which I hardly don't remember anymore. But with this broken Yiddish that it's really difficult to understand. But that's how I knew things. So that's how I'm gonna try to do a couple things. Okay, I'm gonna play a song that I remember from a long time ago. It's called Green Cuisine. This is a song about a cousin who came to America from the old country. She was very beautiful and very pretty and nice and so on. But unfortunately, she met a guy who took advantage of her, stole all her money, and apparently there were rumors that the guy was married and had 5 kids. So at the end, she was blaming actually American society for what happened to her. Again, it's one of the songs that express laughter and yet sadness, so-called Jewish humor, laugh through tears. So, Green Cuisine. It's gonna be part in Yiddish and part in Russian. Zumiriski kumena kusine, Shenvi kolde zigiven begri, Bekelach viruite pomeranzen, Wieselach was benzach zum Tanzen, Bekelach viruite pomeranzen, Wieselach was benzach zum Tanzen. Sie hat nicht gegangen und gesprungen, sie hat nicht gerannt, sie hat gesungen, und das sei sie gewähnt Grine, als sei sie gewesen mein Cousine, und das sei sie gewähnt Grine, als sei sie gewesen mein Cousine. И с Европой путь проделав длинный, к нам в Нью-Йорк приехала кузина. Мы ее здесь новенькой прозвали, так была кузина хороша. Парни ей проходу не давали, на нее смотрели не дыша. Отобрался ей жених не кстати, все ее признанное истратил. После свадьбы он пропал куда-то, злую шутку он сыграл над ней. Говорят, жених-то был женатый, говорят, что 5 детей. It's 30 pagegen, my cousine, fragen sie, was machst du beschriene? En verzimmer mit der treuere Mine, als Masel auf Columbus es bediene. En verzimmer mit der treuere Mine, als Masel auf Columbus es bediene. So the next song, I'll play it first and then I explain what is it all about. Lokshenbrett machen die Warnitschkes und Pfeffer und Salz, Bimmel und Schmalz. Lokshenbrett machen die Warnitschkes. Oi, gewollt, wie nimmt man, wie nimmt man, wie nimmt man schmalz to put to warnitschkes, schmalz to put in warnitschkes und Pfeffer nicht in Salz, nicht kein Bimmel, nicht in Schmalz, Pfeffer to put in the warnitschkes. Oi, gewollt, wie nimmt man, wie nimmt man, wie nimmt man Hussen, essen Warnitschkes, Hussen, essen Warnitschkes, nicht Pfeffer, nicht kein Salz, nicht kein Bimmel, nicht Schmalz, Hussen, essen die Warnitschkes. Oi, wie nimmt man Hussen? So this is a song about one probably young girl who is trying to cook a dish called barnichkes. I suppose it's something similar to vareniki, something pasta, this neighborhood. and she's complaining she practically has nothing to bake it with. So one after one, she explains she doesn't have this, she doesn't have that, and at the end, guess what? Where to name a Hussein, which is a fiance. A Hussein, a fiance who will be eating those warnichkes, who will be eating those food. And again, it's a sort of a double meaning that those varnichkes are not good. So how you can find a fiance, how you can attract anybody to eat a meal something like this. So that's the song.
Okay, so I wanted to say thank you so much to Marina, my mom, for doing this interview with me. It was great to talk to you and learn because I didn't even know some of this. So it was nice to hear about your past and klezmer music in your life.
That was my pleasure saying whatever I was totally unprepared, I have to admit, to this interview. I could talk a lot and I could say way more things about klezmer and Jewish life and Ukrainian life in general. But the most important thing, stay with music, love this music, and that's the best thing. Maybe it will touch your soul, maybe it will get into your head and you'll start liking it.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, it was great talking with you.